Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. I am your host today, Zach Ingo Finch, and I am joined by Gregory Elliott, a good friend of mine, a fantastic co-host, just a generally good human being most of the time. How you doing, mate? You're tired today.
Picking me up more than I deserve there. Yeah, no, running on some low energy this week. There's no real football to fire me up, so just...
Nah, it's not ideal. Greg's had some busy personal life stuff. I had a flu jab the other day, and apparently I'm still dealing with the man flu that comes from it. So yeah, we start in low energy. We'll pick up because we're going to talk about a fun season, a season that feels like a bygone era at this point. It is the 2015 to 2016 season, where we got, I want to say, our highest ever finish, at least in the Premier League, of 6th. It was also our first season back in European competition since like 2003, 2004. So yeah, it was a very, very exciting season. And I wanted to cover off a few of the players and personnel, because that's the kind of way that my brain works when I think back to these sort of times. And then obviously other bits and pieces, of course, as well. Any thoughts on that season? Do you remember much of it, Greg?
Yeah, I do. I do remember that season really well, actually, and it's another one of those seasons that was really strange, right? Like we finished 6th, and it was fantastic. Obviously, we were flying. I mean, it's another one of those ones where, like, I'm just looking at the table now. We finished on 63 points, which really, in the scheme of things, when you think about, the last 4 or 5 seasons and the amount of points totals the top teams have been on, 63 seems like such a low number. But then won. I guess in the same regard, I'd give my left leg for 63 points this season. So,
well, that's the thing. It was kind of weird because like Leicester won with 81 points, and then Villa, Norwich, and Newcastle were relegated this season. Newcastle were relegated with 37. So that was back when I think the big 40 number mattered a lot more. I just don't think it does nowadays. Like, look at the bottom of the table nowadays. It's crazy. But this is where we were sandwiched in between Manchester United and West Ham. We had 3 points less than Man U. So and then obviously City finished in 4th. Leicester won. It was it was that kind of last year. I remember it being that felt like anybody could win the league. Whereas it feels like after this season, everybody got their act together. Lots and lots of money started being spent, and now I think the divide is kind of crazy, right? Like, yeah, it's really weird to think. And obviously, the bottom for relegation was quite tight. You had Sunderland finishing on 39 points, with Newcastle relegated with 37. Bournemouth and Crystal Palace both with 42. So there's not like a huge. It was a much more. I don't know. I guess the Leicester winning really shook everybody, right? Because they didn't go undefeated, but it was a crazy, crazy season. But one of our best seasons ever, and one of ours where we picked up quite a lot of what I would consider like core prolific Saints players over the last couple of years. So we're going to talk about a couple of them today. Most will know. So we're going to start off with a man who played alongside Font in the Euros, and that is Cedric Soares. So where do you think Cedric Soares is nowadays, Greg?
I don't know. I have absolutely no idea, mate.
Do you remember where he left after he left us?
No, I can't say that I do.
So that's funny because he went to Arsenal.
That's right. Yeah, he did.
He is still technically at Arsenal.
Wow.
But mainly on the bench. Like I think last season he had a loan spell at Fulham, but yeah, he's been relatively anonymous since then. I think he appears throughout the Arsenal documentary quite a bit. And he's also not played internationally since 2021 either. So it's really sort of one of those, in comparison to some of the other people that have left Saints, obviously he was a really solid right back for us. And it was one of those things where you were talking about how, like, oh, we've got so many right backs. And you remember I was telling you, we went through that little weird crisis where, like, James Ward-Prowse played at right back. Because if Cedric got injured, there was, like, no other players that would play it. And he was kind of, I think, our natural replacement for Nathaniel Klein after Klein went as well. And obviously he put in a few good seasons for us. And yeah, it's kind of weird to think, because obviously he was a lot smaller than you, but he kind of also was one of those, the start of sort of the attacking fullback as well, where like he wasn't really as good defensively as I remember, but was always there.
Always
like
dominate down the wing. I remember that.
100%. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a sad progression of when a player leaves a club for better and brighter things, and then kind of just doesn't really get the game time, and that seems to have kind of been what's happened with him. So then he had a loan spell, and obviously he's still there as an option for Arsenal, but obviously that's not really the case. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, because as you said, like a lot of people have just kind of forgotten about him entirely, but he still technically plays in the Premier League, and that's where he's been the whole time. So that's Cedric Suarez. Now, another person who sort of played in the middle role, sort of defensive midfielder, kind of. Do you remember Geordie Classy? Another.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
So he this was probably his like busiest season for us. So he had about 20 appearances in the league, and yeah, it was just his main sort of season of action before he had like the next season where he had some bit parts, and then he disappeared off to AZ Alkmaar, where he played in the friendly in pre-season this year, if you remember rightly.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so he played in that friendly, and obviously talks fondly about his time at Southampton. But yeah, he was kind of like a player where I just remember there sort of like being. I feel like if you're going to join around the same time as Romeu,
yeah,
and you still got Big Vic in the middle of the park as well. This is before he went to Tottenham.
Yeah,
kind of difficult to get sort of a look in, and I don't think he had the. I don't know. He played really well, but I don't think he quite had the strength and physicality to play in that role as much as the rest of them.
Not that we were looking for at that particular period of time.
No. So, but like he seems to have sort of been all right, and he's had a sort of relatively sort of stable career at AZ since then. So yeah, that's where Geordie Classy is currently now. So we'll talk about a definite famous saint that will be on your list after a word from our partners at Zencastr.
Yeah, so here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description and learn more about Zencastr.
Right here, mate. So the next player on this list is the ever reliable, a man who managed to get himself a transfer off of the back of dominating Liverpool at St Mary's, is Sadio Mane, who I recently saw in like a Twitter post that went viral, that did my head in. That was like, just remember what Klopp did for this club. It was sort of like insinuating that Klopp is the one that developed Mane and Virgil, as opposed to seeing two really good players and taking them away from what it was a fantastic Southampton side at the time.
Yeah.
So it's very upsetting. But obviously, he was our top scorer during that season as well, with 15 goals, including a hat-trick against Man City
in Premier League history, right?
Yeah.
Against Villa. Yeah.
I think, but yeah, he had that was the season he had the hat-trick against City as well. But obviously, it didn't, I'd say it didn't work out great for him. It did at Liverpool. And then afterwards, sort of, he had that, year at Bayern Munich where...
You got on a changing room bust up with someone, right?
And then obviously that kind of spelt the end of his career at Bayern. Yeah, somebody it was very sort of weird. It sort of felt with him going out of that Liverpool system he played in for so long, it just didn't really get to shine as much. And now obviously he's in Saudi Arabia, as we found out the other day. My favourite football league. It's not. They annoy me. Al Nassr is where he plays. So he plays alongside sort of Cristiano Ronaldo. But yeah, it's a weird one. Like we have never replaced him. We have always tried to sort of find a really, really pacey winger on the side, usually sort of African origin as well. So like we kind of replaced him with Djenepo a little bit, if I remember rightly, for a short period of time. Well, no, but like the idea was that we picked up this sort of unknown in sort of the lower European leagues, really, really pacey winger. And he would become another Mane, and it just hasn't happened.
No comparison there whatsoever. It's mad to me, but yeah, I mean, Mane was just such an unbelievably quality player. He was still quite raw when he played for us. There was a lot of really felt when he picked up the ball that you had no
Go either way,
clue
right?
what he was going to do with it, because neither did he. And it just sometimes that turned into a flash of absolute brilliance. But yeah, what a player, and what a player he went on to become. And yeah, and I mean, it's often said, I see it posted a lot about sort of how humble of a man he is and what he does for his sort of roots and his village in Africa. So
Yeah,
shout out for being a good human too.
Yeah, I think that's like the nice thing. It's the same with Big Vic in Kenya, right? Like I remember he had like a road named after him or something like that as well. Like these players deeply care about their background and have always represented their nations in the Africa Cup of Nations. But yeah, like Mane truly was one of like the greats to put on a Southampton shirt. But you're right, he wasn't the player that he went on to become. But I think the difference with him when he played for us is he had those moments of like absolute brilliance that came out of nowhere more often than he had those moments of why have you managed to put the ball out of the stadium sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, fantastic player for us. And then a personal favourite player of mine, one that I don't think you named in your top 11, which was upsetting, is Dusan Tadic. Because Dusan Tadic was just an incredible. He was Koeman's first signing, by the way, in 2014. He was the fourth player to achieve 3 or more assists in one Premier League game as well, which is like a random stat. I know how you like your stats. But yeah, Dusan Tadic just an amazing player. I was kind of devastated when he went. It felt like the reason he was let go was they were kind of like, oh, he was past his best kind of thing. And he went on to Ajax and got to
right?
The Champions League final. It was like, what?
Yeah. You're right. It felt strange at the time as well, because he was such a quality player. We talk about those players who raise the game of the players around them, and he is one of those. Just his presence and, just the visibility he had of a game of football presumably has, that's another player that we've never had a player of that same sort of quality.
So where do you reckon he's playing his trade nowadays? Or do you know?
Was he went to, was it Fenerbahce he went to?
He is at Fenerbahce. So he is currently being managed by the special one in a league, which is which he keeps describing as corrupt and terrible and blames every single defeat he has on the officials. Which means if he wants to come and manage us, he'll be at home, right?
Yeah, he fits beautifully with our fan base and with what's happening.
Right. So the next man on my list, Greg, the next guy who we all know and we all love and we miss, and I still miss all of his little pictures of him going on dog walks in Winchester because I'm a sad little man, and that is Oriol Romeu. Plus, I also miss his absolute love and friendship between Maya Yoshida. It was a beautiful thing. So Romeu joined this year. And he joined us for £5 million, which you look at the money that's spent nowadays, and that is a sickeningly low amount for the player that we had for such a long period of Saints' career, right?
He probably paid more out of his wages in booking fines than that transfer fee.
You are not probably wrong. I'm pretty sure he got a book in his first game.
He never got sent off either. To this point, if you put £1 on him to get booked every single week in every game he played, there's no way you weren't leaving the season quids in.
Did he get like his first? I can't remember if it was recently he got his like first ever red card for either Girona or Barcelona. One of the two. I remember that being like a big thing on Saints Twitter at the time. But he was just such a. We always played better with him than without him, and I don't think that obviously our style of football's changed quite a lot since then. But he was just such a brick in like the middle of the park. Like no one could get past him, right? Or if they,
our style of football's changed a lot, but really,
you probably fit in now still.
Yeah, if you're telling me that Flynn Downs isn't trying to emulate an Oriol Romeu type role, you're kidding yourself.
This is also true, but yeah, it's kind of mad because obviously he left us and he ended up going back to Barcelona at one point, and he's currently on loan to Girona. So I think he went to Girona. Went from Girona to Barca for like 2 seasons, and now he's back on loan at Girona alongside ex-Saint, who we've already discussed before, Paulo Gazzaniga. So that's kind of like weird that there's like two little. I love those sort of little two meetups. The same thing with like Billy Sharp playing alongside Yoshida at LA Galaxy for like half a season. It's just sort of bizarre little like they get to know each other in the locker room kind of things.
Yeah.
But obviously, yeah, like I consider Romeo to be a club icon. I did not begrudge him leaving. It wasn't. I don't think him leaving was anything like some of the other ones that have thrown their toys out of the pram.
No, I quite agree. It was done in a fitting manner, and to go back to his boyhood club right in Girona. So
Exactly.
Can't say fairer than that.
Rightio. So I've got some more. We got some sort of big names and then some special mentions. However, first of all, let's hear from the Global Sports Podcast Network. So the Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcasted in 5 different languages. This is your one-stop shop for your daily football fix. Find GSPN wherever you find your usual podcasts. Rightio, so the next person on our list, who's not as prolific in a Saints shirt, but is prolific for one thing, and I think that's, to be honest, probably one of the small highlights of his career, which is Cuca Martina, who you will remember as the guy that scored the absolutely cracking goal against Arsenal.
That goal will forever stick in my memory. And the reason that goal sticks in my memory is that I had just got back home that day from bringing my daughter home from the hospital for the first time. So we got home about 10 minutes before kick-off, and my father-in-law put a roast dinner in front of me, and I sat down and nearly threw it everywhere as I jumped up shouting at that goal, and definitely woke up my newborn daughter at that point. So.
Good Lord. That's the thing. That was just such an incredible goal. And like that is mainly what he's known for, which is, I guess, upsetting because he also plays international football for, let's say, Curacao? Have I made that up? Have I massively fluffed this? Let's find out. But he's obviously like, one of the other things is he was like a loyalist of, yeah, no, I was right, Curacao. Or Curacao, I always pronounce that really badly. But he was like a Koeman loyalist. So after he left us and his contract expired, he was picked up again by Koeman at Everton. So he was one of 2 players that another one we'll discuss later. But like, yeah, he played pretty solid for us, really. And like he debuted in our second away leg to Vitesse in the Europa League. So to be fair, considering I'm also going to talk about somebody that played a bit of European football over Jose Font, I'm not really surprised Jose Font kind of felt like he was going to go out the door eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously he went on to play for Everton for a while. And then after leaving Everton, he went to the Netherlands and played for some teams there. And his last team was NAC Breda. And I think he still technically plays for his international club, or international team, sorry. But it was difficult to find like information as to whether he was retired or not, because technically his contract expired July this year. He hasn't been picked up again, but it still lists him as an international player. So I think it's one of those sort of like weird middle ground sort of areas where no one quite knows. But either way,
according to the ever reliable source of Wikipedia in front of me, he's had 2 appearances for the international team in the year 2024. So
yeah, so I can't work out if it was beginning of the year or end. So it's very much very, very strange one. Obviously, next one, not to say he overshadows Cuca Martina, but definitely does. It's obviously Virgil van Dijk, who's one of my favourite players of all time, who we don't need to discuss where he is because he's at Liverpool. And he still plays solid football, and he's still an absolute hero in my eyes, but unfortunately did throw his toys about the pram a little bit when he left. 13 million quid, and we sold him for 75. That's kind of some crazy business that was done back then.
That's classic Saints methodology of making profit back then. But yeah, I mean, what can you say? Just one of the best centre-backs to ever do it.
Yeah, well, the thing is also like goal scoring for us as well. So like 3 appearances in, he scored against Swansea. And he was also the fan and teammates player of the season, his first season, and signed a 6-year deal afterwards. Not that deal meant anything, other than the fact that we got 75 million for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, it was amazing to see him in a Saints shirt and go, cool, that's kind of crazy that he was a Saints player for like a little bit, right? But
and that partnership with him and Font is just, man.
Yeah, incredible.
I mean, yeah, imagine what could have been.
That's how I feel most days, mate, especially with us sitting so glued to the bottom of the table at the moment. So the next player is Graziano Pella, who obviously we all know in love, and he has so much. There's such like a cult formed around him nowadays, right? And that's because he scored. But I still remember like when he first came in, people still complaining he wasn't scoring enough goals. Because obviously, like Mane outscored him this season as well. But it's one of those things that like now we would just be happy if we had shots off on target. But back then, like we were so ruthless as a fan base. And obviously, famously, when he left our club, he went over to China to become the 7th best played player in the world at the time on £350,000 a week.
That's crazy.
for sort of this little old striker, Italian striker from Southampton, and then had a season at Parma, which was his last season before his contract was not renewed. But he did score an overhead bicycle kick, which was his first, like, I say overhead, it was an overhead kick. But which is crazy when you think that, you know, it sort of comes from sort of, you know, he hadn't played in the Serie A for so long, plays in sort of a much lower quality standard league. Although I say that, I think he played a couple of Asian Champions League games in Shandong and then goes back and still manages to do it sort of in an older age. He's retired, but not formally. So he just doesn't have a club, is quite happy to jet set about with his, can't work out if his fiance, wife or girlfriend, but is quite happy and comfortable just sort of chilling and not being picked up because he's probably got enough money to survive forever if he doesn't need to. But yeah, he was just a really solid player for us. But yeah, I do remember sort of I think maybe overshadowed by the return of goal scoring form of like Danny Ings, but he did a proper job for us, and he always scored stylish goals.
What a front three that season, right? Him, Mane, Tadic, just seems such a world away, doesn't it?
It really does, and that's the thing. Like, this wasn't a huge amount of time ago. I say that 8 years for sort of a lot of our younger fans is going to be a long time. For us, though, it's like a blink in time, right? You kind of flick through. So yeah, very, very sort of good player for us, and we're going to move on now to somebody that only had, I barely remember ever playing, and he only made that 12 appearances for us. But it's Yuanmi, I think is how you spell his name. He was a Spanish player, little guy. Do you remember him?
I do remember him, yeah.
So he played like 12 play times against us. His debut was against Vitesse, where he replaced Jordi Claessy, and he's still playing as well. So he's still playing for Betis in the Liga. He also had a season in Saudi, I think just before the Saudi league kicked off to the way that it is now, where it's a highly paid money league, and then is back. But he's still kind of playing. Like, he's played 6 games for the Liga 2 this year. So fair play to the guy. But I genuinely can't remember him much at all, and that's no disrespect. Like, he seems to have gone on to have like a pretty alright career afterwards. But it's like sometimes you get these sort of players, right, that you kind of we have for like such a short period of time. And one of them is on this list that, you know, I'm hoping I'll get to, because I know that we're rapidly running out of time. But yeah, he was a player we had this year.
Crazy.
That's all I have to say. The next one, however, is a much more prolific saint, and that is Ryan Bertrand, who this was the season that he officially joined us after being on loan from Chelsea for a year. He made 32 appearances during this season, scoring once, and stayed right up until 2021. So he did stay solidly for the remainder of his contract, where after his contract expired, he went to Leicester, where he played all of 4 games.
Yeah,
which is kind of upset him before eventually obviously retiring. I think there was an injury or something there, if I remember rightly. And say what you want, he was one of the ones that went to Leicester after he was one of the unfortunate cohort that got 9-0'd. But I don't think that's what I remember of him. I just remember him being our left back solidly. Like, my memory goes pretty much Luke Shaw, blank, Ryan Bertrand.
Yeah.
And then a couple of seasons where we were trying to figure out whether it was Peru or whatnot after sort of Ryan went. So yeah, I think he, considering, like, you know, technically when he came to us, he was a Champions League winning like left back, right? And he played that game. So like, but yeah, he was just I really liked Bertrand. I still remember that sort of. I think that just still knocked him out.
He was a bit of a character.
Yeah.
On and off the pitch, I think it was brilliant. Yeah. Sort of embodied, I think, a lot of the character that ran through the team of that season, for sure. But yeah, when you say Ryan Bertrand, the only clip that springs into my mind is the awful throw-in and the tap of the watch with a wink. Like,
oh, yeah, the awful throw-in. I remember the tap of the watch all the time, and the winks of the camera. But no, he's a great servant for the club, and it's kind of, we've struggled, I really think, to have a consistent left back really until we got Manning in my opinion, and then Manning was our still a consistent left back for most of last year, and now it kind of differs between whoever really fancies giving it a crack, right?
Yeah.
Or whichever four players they decide to shove down the left wing. But it works out quite well. So the next person is Martin Stecklenburg, who also was one of those ones who was a Koeman, loyalist. He actually joined us on loan from Fulham that year and made a couple of appearances. He ended up, after going to Everton, going to Ajax, which is, I think, his original club. And he ended up actually playing in 2020, I think it was 2021 season, he got his place back because Onana was banned for doping, which is a thing that I just never knew about. Because unfortunately, like our Man U cohorts, I just don't have as much knowledge about the ins and outs of every other player. But yeah, so and then obviously he's retired now. But he was one of those ones where he just kind of was brought in, and then I remember seeing him later on down the years on the Everton team sheet. But I think it was hard to kind of move Forster at this point out of the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Forster was on fire at the time, and I think in the couple of games he had with us, he was
right. I think
showed promise, but
wasn't anything. He was a goalkeeper. He was a goalkeeper that played for Southampton. Bless him. But yeah, obviously he's retired now, and obviously he went on. Right, so we got two more, Greg. The rest of the team are all members of the team that we've spoken about previously, and it's kind of it kind of takes the fun out of it if I tell Greg where they are now, if I've already told him, even if knowing Greg, he probably has forgotten. So, Greg, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. Park Life is probably what he's most known for playing at Southampton. I know him as the man that scored a couple of days after we signed him at Manchester United, giving us a win at Old Trafford. That's how I like to remember him. Not as the guy that was fighting with fans on Twitter, uploading a picture of himself in a Liverpool shirt and having a scrap. I will point out before we go any further, he's admitted that nowadays that maybe his behaviour was a bit over the top, and has attributed a lot of it to the fact that he's recently, as an adult, being diagnosed with ADHD, something that both me and Greg also know about, so you can kind of forgive him a little bit. However, he now plays his trade mate at my hometown, which is bizarre to think, and he plays for AFC Tottenham, plays for the Stags.
Yeah, that's mental, isn't it?
I guess some people just love the game, because clearly he must have enough money to not.
Fair play, why wouldn't you want to keep playing? I mean, it shows that he was always a player in it for the football and nothing else.
Exactly. I think he was quite more realistic. Some of our fans had a bit of a meltdown about it.
And right up until the sort of the crazy stuff, always gave 100% on the pitch. You can't.
I still remember him
what he put into the game.
No, not at all. There was one game I remember. He scored I think it was we were playing West Ham, and he scored the last gasp minute penalty against West Ham. It was something like the 96th minute. We got a pen against them. We scored. We won. It was 2-2 right up until that point. And I'll always remember that. But he was just a solid player for us. And I know that I think it was just a bit sour when he left. I think from both ends, right? Fans giving him a bunch of stick because he actually supports a team and put it up there you should never do that, and obviously he would get riled up, so then he would start tweeting back. And if anything, I think it shows you the how good the social media managers of players are nowadays in comparison to even a couple of years ago. But yeah, the fact that he rocks out for my hometown is very, very bizarre, but fair play to the guy. So the last one, Greg, the last man is a centre back we had for a little bit, is Stephen Corker, who who was on loan that season from QPR, who played 8 times in total. He only played twice in the league, 1 time starting, 2 as a substitute. The rest of the times he played in Europa, which is nuts if you think about it. He played in the Europa League more than he played the league for us. He's now at Ankara in the Turkish second league. So basically the Turkish equivalent of the championship. But he is somebody that comes up on a list quite a lot of players you never knew played for Saints. And it's yeah, it was a bit weird. It's mad. Not a huge amount you can say. He played enough games to have made an impact that season, I guess, but not enough for me to remember much of anything other than seeing him on the starting lineup and being like, who's Kolker and Stecklenburg? Like, that was probably a couple of the thoughts I had at that time. But yeah, so it's obviously the rest who were at the club with people like Yoshida, Stephen Davis, Rodriguez, Gaston Ramirez went out on loan that season, James Ward-Prowse, Matt Targett, Harrison Reed, Sam Gallagher, obviously all went off to their respective destinations in the end. But yeah, it was just kind of a mad season, like us getting one of our highest finishes in like one of the weirdest years that we possibly could have. And then obviously afterwards, the problem is that this was the season that put everybody in the shop window, right? Yeah. So Virgil van Dijk got in the shop window, so did Mane and everybody. And then
league that year was this the last year that football was really truly great?
I think if you look at the points in the league and you look at the difference, like sort of people going down on sort of like 37 points and then the league being won on 81 shows you that it was far more competitive that year. And what I mean by far more competitive is a lot of the big players sort of the big players of the league really struggled to kind of get into the positions you'd be expecting to us. Like to put it into context, we finished 2 places above Liverpool that year. That's crazy. Chelsea finished 10th. Leicester won, Arsenal and Tottenham were 3rd. Arsenal were 2nd, City were 4th, which you just can't fathom nowadays. Well, I don't know, your current form. And and that was also a season that like West Brom and Sunderland and Swansea and Stoke were like solid staples of the Premier League. And that shows you, like, you think now of like solid Premier League teams, you think of your sort of Evertons and your Crystal Palace and all that kind of stuff. But this season really shows, like, look, you've got Stoke, who are no longer in the league, Swansea, Watford, West Brom, Sunderland managed to stay up by 2 points. It's kind of crazy. I genuinely do think that like the league is something different now, because even the amount of points being taken by sort of the top 10 to the bottom 10 means that you're not having the level of competition. Like, I think that a lot of fans are stuck in that mentality of like, well, 4 points, it's not even by Christmas, we're going to be down automatically. And I think that back then, because Villa went down with 17 and were stone cold bottom, but they also got 3 win and 8 draws that season. Whereas I just don't think that's something that happens nowadays. That shows you the golf. That's not even a decade. And yet, the differences between absolutely crazy. But it was a fun year all round. We all remember Leicester fondly. I will remember all of those people that were like, I hope Leicester beat us at home, because then it'd be nice to see them win the league, because that's not how you support a football club. Especially a football club like Saints. We need to support our players as much as they possibly can, which is why we try desperately to remain positive. I do all of my work possibly to undo Greg's positivity. Not intentionally, it's just unfortunately who I am as a person. But it was a fantastic season, and long may, I think, hopefully it gives a bit of hope to everybody that with the ups and the with the downs, there are also ups, and this was probably peak of at least our lifetime of the ups. But then we went on to play Puel ball for a little bit, and that was terrible, and we kept finishing all right. So what do we know? Swings and roundabouts. Hopefully there's some light at the end of the tunnel. We never know, we might end up becoming good. So that's the positive note I want to leave you on.
Telling you, mate. 15 points next 5 fixtures. You wait and see.
Wonderful. So just to let you know, Greg still got that clipped for Christmas. It's actually scheduled for all of our socials to go out on Christmas Day, regardless of the position of the league. And with that, I have been Zach Ingo Finch. This has been Gregory Elliott. You've been listening to the Daily Southampton, part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. If you want to help us out, as we're a young, growing podcast, follow us on all the socials. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And we will join you in the next week for whatever we've got planned up our sleeve. We've got lots of wildcard content.
Yeah, reviewing Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, because there's no real football on.
Hopefully, maybe we'll talk about what some of our players got into the internationals and how upset we are that Rambo didn't make it, and also how upset we are that he definitely is going to be back after 2 weeks, right?
That's it. Let's hope.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.